it is basic computer skills. I mean, it's computer skills and internet skills and known skills, but also keyboarding skills function on it so they can do keyboarding.
Okay, how many guys? Did you get any graduates to do that stuff? Okay, and that's we're closing in on.
I mean, since
Graduation. Yes. Well, I purposely not want because we want to get the stuff. Did you have a drop in enrollment from, let's say, yeah. Better. Yeah. I was just telling my guy, we had yeah, exactly. The old and none of them have really come back to distance. But have you had an overall drop? Ours dropped precipitously.
Working for
oh, yes.
And in-house wider, we had QA and STEM lab.
No. The last thing you want me to do is be a secretary. I can't even read my own handwriting. Let alone take it down. Take it down for other little
watching out. So we end up
probably kind of start. Does everyone have the opportunity to
Yes. I'd be interested in more about.
Good morning.
good morning.
Morning.
This is the wall I can't access. I'm Frances Kosky. I'm the State Director for Adult Education. And I want to welcome you and thank you very much for agreeing to participate in this advisory council. Derek Welch, who is the Director of Operations for the Higher Education Department, he actually Derek wants to stand. Just don't go beyond.
Don't walk into the light is what you're telling me.
Exactly. I stand in front of these things and knock them out. Well, I've come in today. The secretary unfortunately couldn't come this morning. He has a funding formula meeting for the higher education funding formula this morning, and the deputy secretary is with him on that. So I've kind of been sitting in their stead. But he wanted for me to convey to y'all first his sincere thanks for volunteering to be on this committee. Adult education is critical to the state of New Mexico. As I'm sure y'all are aware, there's more than 1,000 New Mexicans that need our help, need our assistance. And with this advisory committee that y'all are forming, you're going to help us evolve our policies and make sure we're going on the path to serve these citizens. You know, by doing the adult education services or providing the adult education services that you're advising us on, you know, we're going to help these students and these citizens in New Mexico become better parents, better workers, and get out into the state and just be productive model citizens. And it all starts with the advice that y'all are giving us. So again, thank you for coming. Enjoy your orientation. I'm not going to be very long because y'all have a lot to do today. And again, my apologies for the secretary not being here, but he wanted to say that this is of the utmost importance for the state, for the agency, and for adult basic education. And if you need anything from any of us, Francis will provide y'all our contact information. We're always available to help y'all with anything y'all need. Okay? Good luck. Have a great day in here. Enjoy some of the coffee. And thank you for doing this again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Derek, very much.
Thank you.
This is quite a smaller group than yesterday, so we will have no trouble probably being finished by noon. First of all, I would like us to introduce ourselves. You have in front of you a list of everyone who has agreed to be on this committee and their contact information. But let's introduce ourselves going around the table. We should probably start at that end.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jenny Lambert. I'm the Director of Adult Education in Farmington, New Mexico at San Juan College. And I was here yesterday, but I wanted to meet you or actually see your faces. I'm a visual learner, so I wanted to at least make official contact with all of you. And I won't stay for the whole session, no offense to Francis, but I'm looking forward to working with you.
I'm Ben Wakashigi. I'm retired, and but I'm on the board for the New Mexico Coalition for Literacy, and also I'm also on the board for a local adult learning community organization called Read West. And I'm here to learn more about the AV.
I'm Tom McGaggy with New Mexico State University of Grants. I'm the coordinator of the adult ed program there, and I have been active in adult ed issues since I came here 9 years ago.
Good morning, I'm Michael Wright. I'm an analyst for HED, Adult Basic Education.
Lawrence Isaac with Navajo Technical University, Crown Point, New Mexico. I'm the ABGV program director. And I brought my spouse, my security blanket, Yazi. Heard of me, everyone. And we have previously worked with Dr. Banowski, and so we're meeting up with old acquaintances, and then I do like the colleague from San Juan. I want to be able to meet everyone face to face, the colleagues, and we are grateful that our university is included. So we definitely do share the same challenges and the goals that we have. We have our own needs for that area, so we are here eager to help. Thank you.
My name is Debbie Maldonado. I'm the manager of the Western Mexico University Adult Education Program. I'm located in the southwest corner, up here down there by Arizona and Mexico. I think it's a great thing that we're doing here. It really is, because it's something that everybody's different areas can voice in, and we can get everybody on the right track and join programs, not just AV programs, but other type of programs together that are doing the same thing.
My name is Richard Cervantes. I'm an Associate VP in Research at New Mexico Tech. I've been there 11 years now. Before that, I was the Dean of Administration at Eastern in Roswell, where they had an adult basic education program. I got affiliated with the Coalition for Literacy probably 8 years ago, I suppose, somewhere around there. And I'm no longer on their board. I do get calls from time to time. So I know a little bit about the adult literacy in New Mexico and want to continue helping that program and those people.
Are there people remotely?
Yeah. Judy, good morning. Can you hear us?
I can, Michael. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. I'm going to turn you up right now.
Try again, Judy.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, it's a little fuzzy, but you can speak up a little bit louder.
Sure.
Much
My
better.
name is Judy Hofer. Much better.
Much better.
I'm the director of the adult ed program at UNM Taos.
Thank you. Marisol, can you hear us? Marisol, good morning.
Yeah.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear us? Marisol Archuleta, can you hear us?
little magnetic ones that sell at Walgreens?
Yeah, I bought one of those last summer. It was all right, but like I put the
Yeah. How about Matthew? Can you hear us? Good morning.
and then my daughter kept on just like tear it down. My husband-
And Nathan, good morning. Can you hear us? Everybody is unmuted and they can speak freely, so anytime you have any questions, please feel free to speak up.
Michael?
I mean, if
Yes.
If it's done, maybe just give me an estimate
Michael,
on what it was.
Hilda from Eastern New Mexico University. I'm the director here, and we also have Monica Gonzalez that will be joining us.
Wonderful. Good morning.
We're able to throw.
That everyone except Michael, you need to type the message.
Some of these have a little tracker.
So we'll be listening to their conversation.
Oh, I can just mute her.
Okay, but she doesn't seem to be able to hear us. Oh, she can, okay. Okay, again, welcome. I am really, it's particularly interesting and wonderful to me to have people who are affiliated and formally affiliated with the Coalition for Literacy. There is, historically, we have not collaborated well. And I don't have any idea why that is, and don't really care, because we could do that. And this is great that you're here. We can come up with ideas about how to do that. So really, thank you so much. And I want to tell all of you also that this council's membership is not closed. Anybody can come, can join it at any time. You can bring people to any meetings that you think might have particularly good ideas. We need creativity, we need different points of view, we need different kinds of experience. And I want to point out that one sector we're lacking still is employers. We don't seem to have any employers. So, you know, and we want to work with those. And we are able to work with employers at a local level, program by program. And so I want to do Michael, the slideshow thing to. You have a copy of this slideshow, just loose in front of you somewhere. Oh. Hope I can drive. How do I go backwards, right?
I say, you know.
There's nothing on it. But yesterday I think this was too far. Remember? Okay, just an overview of adult education. I want to point out, we're calling it adult education. Historically, it's been called adult basic education. It says adult basic education division. That's a division of the New Mexico Higher Education Department. That's what it's called by statute. So anytime we say division, we sort of have to call it adult basic education. But nationally and statewide, there's a consensus, a growing consensus, that there's nothing basic about it. The calling it ABE can be offensive and off-putting to students. So we're adult education, that's the field we're in. Funded and overseen by HED are 26 adult education programs. We know there are many more, but we don't know about them. They could be brought into this committee too. All of our services are free. We serve about 20,000 New Mexico adults every year. The definition of an adult is a federal definition under the Workforce Investment Act, Title II, of adults aged 16 and older who test below the high school completion level. Now, we are authorized by the National Reporting System for Adult Education, also known as the NRS, and you will hear us say that a lot. NRS, and not always happily. We are authorized to use a number of assessments to test student progress. So if a student who comes into our program, they must take one of those tests. If they test below high school completion, which is grade level 12.9 on one of those tests, they're eligible for our services. There's a common misperception that people who have high school credentials, graduation credentials, can't come to adult education. That's not true, because that's by far not the only thing we do, is prepare them for that. Students come to us who have been out of school a while and want to go to college, and they want to try to avoid developmental ed, for example, or remember what math was, which we all forget about 10 minutes after the end of our last class, right? And then also eligible are students age 16 and older who speak English not well, according to their own self-reporting. People who want to learn to speak English better. Those are English as a second language classes, we call them, in New Mexico, or ESL. So that's who we are.
Yeah,
Yes,
this is trivia, but there's also ESOL. You may hear both, and actually that's what we use in our program, because the assumption when you say ESL is that English is the second language, and that's not always the case. English is my third language, and I know many foreigners who are in that predicament. So you will hear ESOL and ESL, and ESL really mean the same. They're just looking at it from different angles.
ESOL stands for English for Speakers of Other Languages.
And people coming from Europe or Asia or Africa, maybe English is probably not their second language.
And another thing is that students, thank you for bringing that up, Jenny, because students for whom English may be a first language, for example, in this state, many members of the Navajo Nation have English as a first language, but need to learn it better and would benefit sometimes from English ESL classes more than they might from adult education classes, because those teachers have a different expertise. So, thanks. Historically, it began formally. We've always had adult education in this country, by the way. In the 19th century, we had it. But formally, it began in World War II, and it was started by the U.S. military, the Department of Defense, actually, because they needed to have their soldiers become literate. Many of them were not. And it continued on. They worked with people in the civilian world so that their soldiers, after they got out after the war, could continue on and maybe get a high school credential. And the GED test was developed around then also, I think 1949 or something. I can't remember the first GED test, which was developed by a not-for-profit company and became quickly the sole source of an alternate high school credential in the United States and in much of the rest of the world, of the Western world. It was then funded separately under the Adult Education Act first in 1966. That was an anti-poverty initiative. So it was considered in the 60s, during the war on poverty, it was considered to be an anti-poverty program. It has evolved with the culture of the United States to become now a workforce concern. And in 1998, after being funded under a series of anti-poverty laws, it became funded under Title II of the Workforce Investment Act. Title II is also called AFLA, which is Adult Education and Family Literacy Act. That act is about to be reauthorized under a new name. We'll talk about that later. The Workforce Investment Act is administered at the federal level by the Department of Labor. Title II is administered by the Department of Education, These are the 5 titles of the Workforce Investment Act. The reauthorization that's coming up soon, we hope this summer, will retain those same 5 titles.
So Title II is administered by the Department of Education under the jurisdiction of the Department of Labor. Okay.
And recently, in the last few years, the Department of Labor and the Department of Education at the federal level have really begun to collaborate closely about adult education, which is new and wonderful. They have some federal agencies working together toward a common end. And also with the U.S. Department of Health. I don't think that date, 2003, is correct. The first law, the Workforce Investment Act, was authorized for 7 years, and it expired in 2005 or 6. And so since then it's been unauthorized, which means that it's been operating under a continuing resolution, not getting extra funding, just limping along. And we have to apply for grant extensions every year.
Do you know why it was not reauthorized?
To be reauthorized, Congress has to decide to do it or not to do it.
And Congress has been introducing other things.
I think Congress has not been concerned. And amazingly, they're concerned now, and this is the Congress who's been concerned with so many other things, so let's not look at the horse in the mouth. And finally, looks like they're going to do it. I should point out that we are funded in adult education in Title II as a what's called a formula grant, as opposed to a competitive federal grant. So we don't actually apply. All states receive federal funding for adult education based on a formula that the feds use using census data, and they hope it aligns with our needs and our population. The bottom pending legislation, that's old pending legislation, I apologize. And wonderful that that is not going to happen. They wanted to consolidate everything into a single fund, and they were thinking of sending it as block grants to the states. So the executive office in each state could just decide how much to give to adult education every year. But that went away. And we're very pleased. This is our mission, I guess you could call it a mission. We provide those things, basic literacy and numeracy skills. We want our students to earn an alternative high school credential, to prepare for college and careers, and to get trained for the workforce, and to study English as a second language for those same years. This is kind of this is a map. You can see that I was scattered all over the state, which is what, as we should be. We have 26 programs. Many of those have multiple sites. 20 of those programs are associated with community colleges and branch campuses. 3 are at community-based organizations, nonprofits. You know who they are. 1 is Catholic Charities in Albuquerque. 1 is Sage Tepeyac, just north of Gallup. It's a nonprofit. They serve mostly Navajo Nation members. And 1 is ABQ GED, which is a small program also in Albuquerque. So those are the only 3. But if you look at the Workforce Investment Act Title II, you can see who's eligible as sub-grantees, and it's pretty much anybody who is not a for-profit entity and who can demonstrate a history of providing these services. I'm pausing here to point that out because there are some of you here who are not currently involved with our programs and might want to try to be in the future. And we will, if we get this new Workforce Investment Act, and maybe if we don't, we will probably be issuing new requests for proposals this spring.
Yeah, I have to say something about the symbols. Underserved weight listed sites. That's a star with the circle, the red circle in color.
Yeah.
Under the legend. So Roswell and what looks like Albuquerque, they are underserved
And they maintain wait lists. Not all the programs maintain waiting lists. We try to encourage them all to because we need to use that information.
But how did they, because I mean, we have thought about that as a program to cap classes. We don't cap them right now. So if we cap classes, we can have a wait list. Do you know what's their thinking behind that?
Well, some programs, some of our programs operate on, most of our programs now operate on what we call managed enrollment, meaning that they have classes that begin and end at a certain time. Often the terms of those classes are around 6 weeks. Sometimes they're a semester. And most of our programs also have drop-in capabilities for people who just want one-on-one services or want evening classes. It's kind of a mixed thing, but the programs that have managed enrollment, they keep waiting lists because they can only serve, there is a point beyond which you can't serve more, you know. And so they say, get on our waiting list and come back 6 weeks later. The thinking behind why we want you to keep waiting lists is that it helps us when we talk to legislative staff about our need for movement. So we serve 5% of the people who are eligible for our services approximately, and we measure that by using census records and who doesn't have a high school credential or who needs to learn to speak English better. And sometimes people just say to us, well, you're not doing your job. You need to serve more than 5%. I would give you more money when you're not doing your job as it is. So it helps to be able to say we're serving as many as we can. We have waiting lists. And I've actually been told that we need to market ourselves better so we can serve more. And that is true on a local level in some locations that they really aren't serving the number of people they could who have a need in their area. But for the most part, we need that waiting list to help us say that we need to serve more people.
Because we could market, and we've tried, we could market, but we don't have more funding.
That's right.
So my class is already capped. To market means I'm supposedly telling the public, hey, there's a class for you, and they show up, and I say, I'm sorry, we don't have
Most of
room,
us
and I'm not
can't
getting
market.
paid for another year and a half for you being here.
Who provides the satellite instruction?
Let's see, look at an example there. If you look at Carlsbad in the lower right-hand corner, the blue star, Loving and Artesia, they have, what that means is there's a program, administrative site where the star is, and a nearby program, a nearby town or area, they have a classroom, or they provide services there from one of those administrative sites.
So it's not one centralized site, it's distributed within regions.
Some, depending on the program, yes. Of these 26 programs, the Tribal School Board, by the way, that's a K-12 school board. I didn't get to that. And that's out on Navajo Reservation. Our programs range in size from fewer than 100 students to over 3,000. So the ones with over 3,000 have more satellite sites, generally speaking. And the satellite sites sometimes change, often change, because of funding issues.
Have you had programs financially unable to perform to the
Since I have been here, we have not had programs dropped out because they were financially unable to continue. But we were subject to the sequestration. We had some issues there. We've had the state portion of our funding has been cut back over the years, so we've had programs at great risk for that recently.
And do you, another question, the people that are in those programs who are getting to this, are there a percentage of them that are volunteers? Are they hiring? Are these all paid?
A percentage of them are volunteers statewide. And I said at the beginning that we have not a history of formal collaboration with Coalition for Literacy, but I will say that there are many volunteer tutors throughout the state at our programs who are part of the Coalition for Literacy. It's just that our agencies have not come together and planned, and that has sometimes been a rocky road for us because of that.
One issue with the funding on grants, and there are two. There's a site in Acma and Hydroley that are basically funded through another grant. And when that grant runs out, there's no way I'm going to be able to serve those communities. That would be up to the Pueblos to, if they wanted to continue to fund them. And if they don't want to, then it just goes.
So that's another point, Tom. Generally, many of our programs support themselves supplementally with grants, some more than others. Judy, what percentage of your funding? Judy is at University of New Mexico Taos. Could you tell us about, are you there?
No, 1 second.
Oh.
You raised us 40%. That's what she said.
Judy, can you hear us now? She has a question.
I can hear you, yes.
Judy, could you tell us what amount of your funding you get other than through the state?
Other than federal and state, just alternative sources of funding?
Yes.
I would say between 60 and 70% of my budget, depending on the year, comes from federal and state, and the other 30 to 40% we raise through a number of different channels. Sometimes we're able to leverage Title V funding within our institution. We apply and sometimes receive community foundation grants. We have worked with our business community to contract out workplace communication courses that provide some income to our program. We've worked with the mines in the northern part of our community who will fund a program. We've worked with a hospital to get a health literacy grant around tobacco prevention. That is quite substantial. It's been about $13,000 a year for 4 years. We've had town funding. Right now we think we might get county funding. We have students go and speak in front of the county, in front of the town, and they're great spokespeople for leveraging resources for adult ed. We do fundraising. We have an active board that has an endowment fund that we started. We work hard. We work hard to find other ways, but it's not a bad thing because I think it makes us more accountable to our community because we're responding to local need. And certainly it makes us less vulnerable as we're able to diversify our funding source.
Thanks. So that's an example of, and she's located at UNM Taos. She's not a not-for-profit CPO. And then at San Juan College, you are very, you're unusually well supported by your institution.
Right, and it's wonderful because it doesn't make me have to work as hard as Judy in that sense. But by the same token, I'm not allowed to fundraise or try to get supplemental money from any source within that community, because the San Juan College Foundation is very active in recruiting funding for different, reasons. And so if I was to get any extra funding, it would be a grant that I write probably at the federal level. I have to stay away from all of that.
So when I talk later in these slides about the funding, I'm talking about the funding that they get from us mostly. Michael took my tools. There. Excellent. So in terms of educational attainment level, you see that in 12-13, that's our latest full year's data, 17% were at beginning literacy level. Now that's primary school reading level. 9% are at the adult secondary level. That is students who are very close to ready to take the high school equivalency exam. And then, in addition, more than a third are studying English as a second language. And critically, this is at the bottom of the slide, but this has this affects our programs heavily. 75% of our students live in households with incomes at or below poverty level. And that's 100% poverty level. That's not 130% poverty level or 200, it's the rock bottom poverty level.
Francis, the percentages that you have is don't add up to 100%. Is that because some of those are overlapping and they didn't tell you why they were there?
Look in your.
It's not meant to be 100.
It's not meant. I'll tell you what's missing there. Look in the blue folder. The last document in there is a series of tables. If you go to table 4. We'll look at these again later, but table 4 has a list down the side of education, what we call educational functioning levels, adult beginning literacy, adult beginning basic education, right? The adult secondary level, right there, the 9%, is simply these things on here called ASE low and ASE high. The first 6 levels are adult education taught in English. The last group of 6 ESLs they're taught in English too, but to speakers of other language. So where it says studying English as a second language, that's all of the people in the last 6 groups added together. 9% at the adult secondary level just accounts for ASE low and ASE high. And beginning literacy just accounts for groups 1 and 2. And the bulk of our students are actually not listed on the slide. They're the intermediate group.
And interestingly enough, even though the state has commonalities throughout the state, within the different pockets, the numbers are quite different. Northwest, northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. The numbers will be quite different. Like my beginning literacy levels are higher, and my ESOL are lower. I mean, it just varies.
Sure. I would think down south the ESL is going to be high.
Right, even in Albuquerque. Whereas up where I live, it's more Native Americans, and English is still in a way a second language at some level, but that's not how they're grouped.
Yeah, so of course it varies by region.
Right.
And so does ethnicity. This is a statewide snapshot of student demographics. I won't do that too much, but you'll notice that 41% of the student population we have statewide is Hispanic female. You'll be able to learn a whole lot from these tables and peruse them. In a typical program year, over 2,000 earn a high school equivalency credential. Until this year, that was always the GED test. About 1,000 transition to post-secondary training and education, about 1,500 into the workforce, and 1,000 about report enhanced income or promotions after that.
And that's out of the 20,000.
That's out of the 20,000, and that counts all levels, so many of them will do that next year. I want to point out that as you look at these tables and listen to these top numbers here, we only look at, for reporting purposes, students who have 12 contact hours or more. This is not students who sign up for our classes. This is students who sign up and stay through 12 hours. This was the FY13 funding. You see federal allocation slightly more in state appropriation. Other contributions, we get that number by sending what we call a cost survey to the programs, or getting one from the programs each year, in which we ask them what other funding they get. In your case, from your institution, and in Judy's case, it includes grant funding and it includes free tutoring. So we add those, and it comes with the evaluation, and sometimes it's free classroom space. So adding all that together, that in-kind, non-cash information we get from the programs, is about 7.6 million. The last bit of funding, federal, the Instructional Materials Fund, that is an entirely separate funding source. The federal government, as you know, has oil and gas leases, especially in the West, from states. And states collect income from the feds. And so the feds require each of those states to have a statute that states how they're going to distribute federal oil and gas lease money. And in New Mexico, a portion of it is distributed to the public education department, who distributes a portion of that to the higher education department. And it's only for use for instructional materials. And it's not very much, but it helps. So that funding we distribute from HED to each of the 26 programs based on how many students they have, because it's for instructional materials. And it is distributed to them as cash. All the rest of the money is distributed by way of reimbursement.
Question regarding supplemental funding for like the natural resources, oil and gas, things like that. Is there any notion of, say, in-gaming monies basically being funded to locales where you have a need as in adult education?
I would have no idea. I would say that would have to be initiated either by the Indian Gaming Association,
yes,
or by whatever entity, state entity they deal with. But no.
I know it's been tried to hire post-secondary, but not anything below that.
Okay, I have to do that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
On the state appropriation, is that a direct budget line item?
We would like it to be. What it is right now, when agencies apply, agencies get their money through House Bill 2, as most of you know, and they submit, this agency, as an executive agency, submits a request through the governor, the LSC, Governor's Office, and to, that's the Legislative Finance Committee, and through the Governor's Office finance thing, and then a recommendation goes to the legislature about how much to appropriate to the agency for their operations. That's the line But when they submit that request, it's more detailed. And it will include us as a line item on their request, but it is not appropriated as a line item. So they get an operating budget, and we're part of that. And so that's not a guarantee, you know, because they have authority over how to switch their line items later when they get done.
The department makes a decision as to how it's distributed.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are people who believe that that adult education should be a separate line item so that it's stable funding that no one wants it appropriated, that's what it is. That's one question.
But you know, on the other contribution,
13 years before 12, 11, 10. Is this less?
This is less.
Do you have a sense of how much?
In 2010, the state funded us, I believe it was 6.7 million.
In 2010?
Yeah, I believe that's what it was. It might have been 6.
So about 10%.
Yeah.
And the feds?
The feds, the federal funding has gone down much less than
The colleges take out 5% of the pocket, don't they, for administrative purposes?
right.
some do, some don't.
Okay.
Mine doesn't.
Yeah, some don't.
Mine are nice.
I've had her waived in given years, but
Yeah, you're allowed, your college is allowed to do that. And maybe I should tell you, could you go back one slide? Please. Of the federal, I should explain the way that funding must be structured. The federal funding, we must distribute at least 82.5% of that to the programs for instructional purposes. You know, we've got to get that out there. At the minimum, 82.5%. At the maximum, we're allowed, at our level, to expect 5% for administration. At the maximum, in addition to that, we're allowed to use 12.5%, and this does add up. I hope. 12.5% for what's called leadership, and that is activities that benefit the state adult education as a whole, rather than going directly to student education. That's the funding we use to pay for professional development, for example, and including funding a conference once a year. And so that explains a bit.
To get your federal allocation, there must be a match sometimes.
The match. The federal, the AFLA Title II requires, and you have a copy of this in there, it requires that the state or local governments contribute a minimum of 25% of the total adult education funding in the state, which means it does not mean a quarter of the federal funding. It means a quarter of the total. So that pretty much means that if this is the total funding, a minimum of this much must be state funding if this is the federal funding. So it's basically, if you see how big that is, it's a third. is the minimum. The state has to contribute a third of what the feds do. Yeah, but there's a catch. There's also a maintenance of effort requirement. And basically what that says is if your state contributes more, they need to keep contributing that much.
Right.
Now, there are very few states that only contribute the minimum. Texas is one. But you can see this state, well, so we're in danger, by the way, because we once had 6.7 million, which is an effort they expect us to maintain at the rate of about 90% minimum of that. And so we have lately been having to report to Department of Education a portion of that in-kind contributions, if we're allowed to count. We've been having to report that. And it's distressing because the programs need cash. The funding per student per year, if you count all of that stuff, is less than $1,000 on the average in the state. And to give you a sense of the proportion, and less than 300 is contributed by the legislature, okay? So between $7,000 and $9,000 per year per student are contributed by the legislature to K-12 education. So this is pretty little money. And so we're hard up, always.
Well, you know, the instructional material plan is kind of, that's interesting. I never thought of that.
Isn't that
It's not
interesting?
approaching the PED for funding.
Well,
They probably wouldn't want anybody else asking.
I don't know. They don't like us for taking that
Yeah.
out of the deal.
But that's good that you're getting a piece of.
But that's because the statute makes them do it.
Oh, good.
But it's only a few dollars per student if you divide that by, and it's for a whole year. So
Has there been any recovery noted by the state from the federal sequestration of last year?
you mean, did we get it back? No.
Yes,
No
or
way.
any glimmer of hope that we might
No.
pick it back up somewhere? Nothing.
The Congress would have to decide. I don't think they're going to do that. But we have, this is what we're doing now. The last funding cycle, we fund 15% of our performance. Performance-based funding is, we started that. The first year, I believe, was 10, 11, but we used it, and it was 5% performance. The intention after designing that fund was to increase from 5% to 10% to 15 to 20 like that. And the reason for that is, you can see, the reason for the performance segment is that it supports those listed items on the right. It supports student success. It measures what the program does, what it produces for the student outputs, and it rewards performance. But it pays no attention to head count. But the core funding, which that's majority head count, some of it is need, and that's not financial need, that's the need of the local population. It supports access, with that value that we want people to get into these programs. But it only measures the input. It doesn't measure or reward, doesn't reward what the programs do for the student. So, and we have now a task force for funding. We'll talk about funding a little later also. Because we always need to question the efficacy of our funding formula. And it's not even totally clear that performance-based funding is a good idea. So there'll be we'll be talking a lot about that in this whole coming year. And we do have a task force, which is a part of this committee, this council, is focused on that, which anybody can do. This is a computation of return on investment. So let's say 2,241 gained employment or received promotion. That is not an estimate. That is from, or not statistical. This is a data match with Workforce Solutions, where we get specific person-by-person information about where they want to go and how much money they got. Yes, this is 1213 again. And then the next one is a statistical estimate based on the national figures about what happens if you get a high school equivalence. The next one, similarly, is a statistical estimate. The number of students in each case is not. That's exact. 79 left public assistance. That is self-reported. So we count the savings and the income as return on investment. Now, the reason we count the income is because, as you know probably, that when you're doing return on investment, if you want to look at income as a return to the economy, you need to examine propensity of the earner to consume. That's how it returns to the economy. Propensity of the earner to save, or to invest, or to import. It's simple in our situation because our population, their incomes are low enough that we can pretty much count that they have 100% propensity to consume. They've got to pay their rent, buy their gas, and eat, and take care of their kids, and they won't have money left over. So that's, we count the whole thing, 100% propensity to consume. So given that, those contributions to the economy in terms of additional money poured into the economy and savings to it, we've got a huge return on investment.
That's the return on investment of the federal money, not
It's
the
just for-
federal and state.
Did we do this for both?
It's gotta be state. Just
It's for paid federal and state.
It's
looks
not
like
both.
it's just state.
It is
Combined
federal
both.
and state.
12 million.
Is
I
it
believe
21
there
million?
is on the back, the other side of this is the two-sided sheet. No, it's state funding only.
Yeah.
You're right.
Okay, I'm
Five
sorry.
million.
It's just state.
Yeah. So it's return on the investment by the taxpayers investment.
Good investment.
We think so. And that colored fact sheet, we make it every year, make it available all over the roundhouse, at our front desk. You can have it, we put it online, it's gonna really have them share it. Because a lot of our issue is lack of awareness. Now these are some current initiatives that we always need people's ideas about. We're doing, and we'll talk about these other times, but there's a thing called IBEST, which stands for Integrated Basic Education and Skills Training, which is a best practice in terms of reducing the need for remediation in college and improving college completion rates of certificates on career pathways. And you can, I'll tell you later if you want to know how to learn more about how that works, but it has been remarkably successful. It was begun in Washington State in 2005, I believe. And I can make up some numbers, because I can't remember the right ones, but it'll be in the right region. Their first pilots, and I think it was 2005 or 6, were with speakers of English as a second language, and who were not completing, like for example, pharmacy stuff, or other certifications that could get them jobs that are presented in English. And they were taking ESL classes and those English language training classes, and they were not completing. They were completing at the rate of this is a guess. It was in the teens though, 13 and 14%, I believe, was the completion rate. So Washington State developed the IBEST. The IBEST is a team-taught class. It is the content instructor, so if it's the pharmacy tech class again, it's that instructor team teaching with the adult education instructor and the lesson plan and the assignments and the assessments are all designed so the students master both in the course of that. So they don't take remedial, they don't take ESL in this pilot, they just take that team-taught career technical class. And what happened was their completion rate shot up to about 90%. And they were concerned about how well would these students do on an ESL test when the only vocabulary they were learning in English was pharmacy tech vocabulary. And the RESL tests, of course, tested wide range of vocabulary. And they found that they tested about the same as the students who had only been doing ESL. So they even progressed that way. That wasn't good enough for them, so they tweaked the way they did it for ESL students, so that they did have supplemental, because they wanted them to be better with that too. But that's the kind of, that's where that started. And now it's going, lots of states are doing this, and we're trying to do it.
Do you know what, not discipline, but what workforce Santa Fe is trying to
Santa Fe
target?
Community College, I believe they're doing plumbing, they're doing early childhood education, and I think they're trying to do something in the green building trades. Thanks. And we have tried distance learning in collaboration with Project Ideal at the University of Michigan, which has been doing distance learning attempts and fits and starts. We need to get ourselves together to focus on that. We have a number of difficulties. We do need distance learning desperately in adult education, partly because we only serve 5%, but also distance learning can be, if done properly, it can be, if it's done in hybrid classes, and they're all, you may even know about how it can work. It can be much more effective. It can be. Not for everyone, but it can be. We have issues in the state that so much of the state does not have access to broadband. So in terms of students, the same students who are too far away to get to our classes also don't have broadband. However, technology is evolving well enough that cell phone, whatever that is, 4G or 3G or something, that stuff, instead of broadband, can be used. But in New Mexico, there's also large areas that don't even have cell phone coverage. So this is a whole thing, we're trying to figure out a system and even a curriculum that could be adaptable. So just to give you an idea. This is important for you to know. Up until this past year, New Mexico legislation referred to all high school equivalency credentials all as a GED or general education diploma or several things. But that acronym and all the words referring to it was removed from New Mexico legislation last session. And the reason that was important is the bottom bullet, or well, let's just GED has been a registered trademark for a long time. It was always owned by GED Testing Services, which is a nonprofit. But Pearson VUE, a publisher, a for-profit publishing company, purchased, got that. And GED was developing a new test, was in the process of doing that then, and Pearson continued, and it got developed, and it became the test on January 1st. Now, Pearson charges $120 for a student to take all 4 of the tests in the battery. And it's not clear to me, you may know by now, Tom, of what this process is if they need to retake the test. I don't even know about that.
They're saying that they can do retests, 2 retests free, but that you have the local testing center could charge a $10 fee if they wanted to. Now, our testing center has waived that. So they could retest for free 2 times. And then after that, also the issue is we don't know if Pearson's going to jack up the prices next year or the year after, whatever. Yeah, eventually. So and to how much?
Well, and in Europe, they're charging like 3 times what they're charging here. And they were initially going to charge over $300, but it looked like no state was going to. They were going to give up on alternative high school diplomas before they would go with that. But there are lots of issues with involving cost.
Well, as an example, though, our program only charged $35 for the old test.
Yeah.
And the state requires the correctional program that the state covers all the correctional programming costs.
Right. Taxpayers pay for the correction.
So any increase in that comes right out of the taxpayers. So
when Pearson acquired GED testing services, 2 other companies said, that's ridiculous, we can do it for less. Both of these companies are old hands at developing good assessments. One of them is Educational Testing Services. They do the graduate record exam, for example. They've been in the business since the 19-teens, and they're a nonprofit. And the other is McGraw-Hill, CTV McGraw-Hill, who's also been in the business for a long time. So, I mean, decades and decades. So they now have competing tests that are aligned with the GED. They are, according to requests for information that we issued out of this office, they're willing to test for $60 or so.
and do paper and pencil.
And they offer paper and pencil, which is another issue. The prisons have not, by the way, yet given a single GED test since January 1st because they don't have computer systems that are compliant both to the GED test and to the prison security requirements yet. So,
and the state recognizes those certification from McGraw-Hill and the ETS.
But yeah.
We don't know if that's up in the air whether they would or not, because now it doesn't say in the statute that it has to be a GED anymore. It says a high school equivalency test. And all 3 of those tests are normed. They're ready. You know, they're good. And so we don't know if PED what they will accept. But PED is in charge of GED testing. And they've chosen just to offer the GED test. And so far. So we don't know, but there is an issue. There are states all around us who are not even doing the GED anymore. There are some, Wyoming, I believe, is doing all 3, allowing all 3. New York is only doing the McGraw-Hill test, I believe.
Because the state pays for all of the GED testing in New York.
New York was the first to adopt GED,
yeah,
but
because
the taxpayers pay for it. And so they just said, no, we're doing something else. So I think to date, 20-something states have, and this is ongoing, have their legislatures or whoever in that state is in charge of deciding have gone through the process of issuing RFPs or whatever they have to do to select a test. They've initiated that. I think they've gone through that. 20-something have gone through that. And of all of the ones that have gone through it, I know of one that selected the GED solely. The only other ones using the GED are about 3 of them who are allowing multiple tests. The one who selected it solely was Arizona, and that was just recently. But they had the caveat that we're going to just go with this for a year and see how it all pans out with those questions like the ones you asked, how are other states going to recognize it and all that. But given that our neighboring states have different tests, I think that this state is going to find it necessary to accept the other tests if they want people to move here, you know, and
vice versa.
Right.
Leaving the state.
Yeah.
Francis, I've heard that there has been some discussion between PED and HED about using the park for adult ed. Is that still in play?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not privy to that.
Okay.
So it's still, what is it going to take? Another legislation to, or just a decision between departments?
Well, what it should take is the public education department to just say, we'll accept this. I don't think it would even take a rulemaking process. But even if they wanted to, they could do that. That's not hard. You know? That's what it would take.
They should hurry up and do it.
Well, the legislature, I have to say, the legislature is wanting them to do this. So I think that we're not stuck with just the GED.
I tutor a GED student. I know that there was 3,000 trying to get it through before the end of last year.
That's another thing you need to be aware of. That Pearson said, when we do the new GED test starting January 1st, if you haven't finished with the whole battery of the last one, you got to start all over. Yeah. And so there was a big push at the end of last year for these poor students to panic. And you also need to know that the new test is very different. We love the new test.
Harder is harder.
It's harder.
It's different. I think it's harder because it's different. It's.
But it is harder.
It's different thinking.
Yeah, and it's different. Yeah.
It's measured by web depth of knowledge. You know, the answers are measured that way. So it requires students to have the ability to, for example, read something and then answer questions and give evidence from the reading. You know, so they need to be able to read much better and read complex texts and things like that. And all 3 of those tests share that quality. That's just been a move. It's changed.
The kids that are homeschooled, this is the only way they can get their degree. Is that correct?
Yeah, at this moment it is. In statute, there are other ways, but I don't believe that PED has gone there. There are ways they theoretically could.
But most of the homeschoolers don't go through any of the certification processes that the state has established for homeschool certification. They just pull the kids out and say they're being homeschooled.
So, but this is pretty much the only way for them to get a high school credential.
So, just as it seems very confusing that PED is responsible for this part, yet under the federal money allocation, the money comes to HED.
That federal money that comes from AFLA cannot be used to do anything about GED testing, only to prepare them. For example, we can pay, or programs can pay out of their federal funding for practice tests for the GED, because that's part of the preparation. But when it comes to taking the test, they can't. That's a federal thing, and then it's characteristic of the state that PED administers that and HED administers adult ed. Because in some states, in many states, they're both in the same agency.
I have a question. Between GED and high school equivalency credentials, the courses offered under these two, now they are basically the same, right?
Yeah, high school equivalency credential we use now instead of saying GED. This is kind of a change in vocabulary.
I was a little confused there.
Yeah. Not surprised.
It's the same thing, just different name.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all it is.
Except it's not the same, because GED is a specific test, and high school equivalency, the GED is one of those. It's a high school equivalency, gets you a high school equivalency credential. The TASC, T-A-S-C, from McGraw-Hill gets you one in some states. And the HiSET from Educational Testing Services gets you one in some states. But all of those are high school equivalency tests.
The 26 programs now operating in the field, they have input as to what may or could be the best practice in the subject matter in terms of selecting the best approach in the testing option.
Yeah, this is good. This gets us back to the purpose of this committee, or this council. There is a group that's a subset of this council, which you're all free to participate in, called the Professional Development Committee. And that's what it's about, is looking at best practices, looking at local program needs, looking at what's available in terms of curriculum, and designing a professional development system in this state to ensure that our students get offered the best approach, in a way you put it, in every way. So that's one thing that they're doing to help us spend our professional development funding effectively. Okay, that's one of the committees. That's it.
Was there a memorial in the last legislative session relating to adult treatment?
There was, so why don't you guys look at the blue folder, which is about funding formula. And that blue folder had in it those tables that we looked at briefly. It has a duplicate of the little schematic about our formula. And it has a copy of the state rule about how you fund federal fund adult education. And before we begin this right now, I want to finish what I was saying about the funding. It's the maintenance of effort funding from the state and the federal funding have to be expended according to the federal rules. State funding does too. Because if we count it as maintenance of effort, we've got to treat it like federal funding. So I just want to be sure everybody knows that. So unless the state rules are more restrictive than the federal rules, then both pots of money have to follow state rules. An example of that would be the feds are pretty, they tiptoe around the idea of is money expendable for food? Or when is it? Right? They tiptoe around it. currently in New Mexico, you may not spend money on food. So according to the feds, we may not spend money on food because the state law is more restrictive. The federal reimbursement for mileage is more than the state reimbursement for mileage. We have to reimburse according to the state rules. So that's just a little thing you need to know. And we will, by the way, once we decide about meeting in the future, we will reimburse you for costs of travel, but we hope there won't be much. We hope that a lot of this can be done remotely or remotely. Okay, this regulation, I want to just point out that you can read it at your leisure, but if you, okay, this must be an old copy, I apologize. Oh no, that was no appeal. Oh yes, 2010. We went through a process in 2010 to amend the NMHED because we were designing a performance-based funding formula. So we added into these funding rules that a component, performance-based component, must be present in the formula. Now, if we decide to do it some other way, which we likely will not do, but we could, that would mean we would have to change the regulation to undo that requirement, which would not be a big deal, probably. So just wanted to point that out. Now, when you look at the performance funding and the core funding, these tables are where we look for performance. For example, you were on table 4. We look at currently number who completed a level, for example, for each program. You're looking at the statewide numbers, but all of the programs have this too. The feds require us to have a statewide database and the programs to enter their data. It's a web-based database. All the programs have data text that enter data. The supporting requirements represented in these tables are those of the NRS. We also collect a lot of other information that doesn't appear on these tables, but is accessible in our database. Now, if you look at table 5, which is a few tables after 4, those are what the NRS calls core follow-up outcomes. You can see that's entered employment, kept a job, got a high school equivalency credential, or entered post-secondary education. I would like to point out that in terms of those core outcomes, adult education in the state, unlike some other educational outcomes, we have some that are looking good nationwide. Last year, 12-13, New Mexico ranked in the top quartile for GED completion, success, getting a GED. 90% of the students in New Mexico who took the full battery of GED test passed it, which put us in the top quartile nationwide, which we're pretty proud of. And in terms of transition to post-secondary, we're in the top half. So that's something that makes us happy. So those,
Francis' data is strictly for the adult ed programs that are funded by the state.
That's right.
None of the other programs.
Right. we don't even know how many students are served in other ways. You know, we know that there are adult education activities going on in church basements, ESL activity, you know, we don't know any of this. So the funding formula is a matter of some urgency this coming year. Right now, the funding formula task force, which is also a part of this council, we have funding formula and professional development already working, and they can be joined by others. Right now, you're at the stage of finalizing the formula we're going to use in a week to distribute next year's funding. Once that's done, we have got to seriously undertake an examination of our funding formula to get something that we can keep stable, which brings me, I haven't forgotten, we have, when you do performance-based funding, there's several major issues. One is that it can discourage risk-taking and innovation. And we don't like that, because that's the only way you move forward. So that's one thing that's major that we have to address. Another thing that's major is that we have a limited pot of money. So it's inevitably going to be a punitive approach to funding when it's not intended to be. Because in order to reward those who perform well, we've got to slap down those that aren't doing so well by taking some of their money to give the ones. And so House Memorial 99 in the last session required the Higher Education Department to assemble a study group to figure out a way to fund, a formula to fund adult education, to fully fund adult education. I don't know quite what fully means, but I suspect it means fund it with extra money so that it can do a true performance-based model without penalizing. Based on a full workload, whatever that means, to adult education. And they have to do this by August 1st. They have to report to the LESC. And last week they decided they were going to do it.
Good.
2 months. And so they're assembling the people to be on this working group. Now I will keep you all informed of the ways you can participate or not, but informed of what's going on with that to the extent that I'm informed about it. But that's very important, because for a performance-based funding formula to work, you need to be able to have incentives instead of incentives counterbalanced by disincentives. In practice, what happens when you do that is programs who are large, who may be having performance problems, quite rightly figure out that mathematically the thing to do is just get more students. You know, so it's just the lack of additional funding kind of cripples the purpose of it. So this is going to be an issue we're going to have to be working on, and getting very, very creative.
Also with that, the demographics of each program are so varied. SAGE is what, 95% Navajo, I think. My program is dual minority serving. I think it's about 15% or 10% of the state enrollment is 16 and 17. My program's like 33%, 16 and 17. I mean, you have all these variations throughout the state, and then to come up with one set performance-based funding formula is pretty difficult.
The challenge is to come up with a funding formula that, given the diversity in the state, still encourages the entire state to head in general direction we want to go, and that is a challenge, and we'll be addressing that. And so that's one, that we have those two committees now already formed and waiting. The funding formula one actually hasn't begun to address these new issues. We're just getting the formula this year finished. And then there will be a third one, which is to draft our state plan. Now these are on your agenda, so you don't forget what they are. If you look at the green folder, what you've got is the state plan in there. Now look at the date at the bottom of the first page. This plan has been revised in teeny tiny ways every year ever since the Workforce Investment Act expired. We've done revisions that say things like, this year our goals, our state performance goals will be that. This year, if it had the year it happened, we will issue a new request for proposals. There's like a 4 or 5 sentence revision every year, and that's it. This is an obsolete state plan. We need to revise it. Most states are in this situation because everyone's been knowing that we have to do a new state plan when they reauthorize the act. And they didn't want to go through the trouble until they knew what it was to do. We decided to write a new one and enlist your assistance to do it. And then, oh, and the other piece of it, by the way, is just the guidance from the feds about how to develop one. But then what happened is that the feds, the Congress, decided to do the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, which is the reauthorization of the WIA, and it will probably go through, what is expected to go through this summer. So you've got here in your loose papers in front of you, this is a general overview of the Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act. Now, the interesting thing is that it's bipartisan, bicameral. It has support from the leadership of both bodies of the legislature. It reauthorizes from 15 through 2020. And the general focus of the changes is on streamlining programs, reporting requirements at administration. Now, remember the 4 titles you saw on the other slideshow, it maintains that structure. It does not create block grants that we so feared. It eliminates 15 programs that exist, but not ours, which is good. And those are listed on this, in these slides. Now, the thing is that they have the Senate, it's a Senate bill. So the Senate has agreed so far to attempt to get unanimous consent before the Senate. And that expedites it. That limits the amount of debate and discussion that goes on. And it's kind of astonishing they agreed to do that since they seem to prefer to filibuster. And then after that, it goes to the House. And they have a thing called the suspension calendar in the House. And what that, if you go on the suspension calendar, suspension means that it needed expedition. And so it also limits the debate process and the amendment process. In fact, it doesn't allow debate or amendments. It just goes to a vote. So if the House and the Senate continue to feel the way they now seem to feel, as of last week, that these were agreed to, they continue that, this could go fast. And it's generally assumed in the adult education community that it's going to happen this summer now. Now, what this means that's critical to our work with this council is that this new state plan will be done jointly with Workforce Solutions. We have to come up with a plan where we work together. In the old Workforce Investment Act, we were encouraged to do that. Very few states did. But now we're going to be required, which is a good thing, because there's such a disconnect between Workforce Solutions and adult education that should not be there. And we can help remove it by working with them. But we'll need your help, because for all I know, they've got a committee right now already doing their state plan for next year, and now they're deciding, oh no, we have to do it this way, and we need to right away figure out how to get together. And so, what department is that? Workforce Solutions. It's the State Department. It's the State Department. Yeah.
Are they here? They must be here somewhere.
They're here somewhere.
Yeah.
They're also in Albuquerque. I think their main office might be in Albuquerque. I'm not sure. They have a huge office there. But they're also in charge of the one-stops, where you go in and you can get public assistance, you can look for work, you get online and, get evaluated about what you'd like to do, what your papers look, get help doing job applications, and we should be involved in all the one-stops to help people get ready. And in fact, in the state, we're able to be closely involved with exactly one of them. And that's the one in Ruidoso. And the reason we're closely entwined with the one-stop in Ruidoso is that it is housed at ENMU Ruidoso, and the director of it is the director also of adult education. And so he gets it. And so it's just systemic there. But we all ought to be like that. We should be represented on local workforce boards. So these are things we get to work on. You can help with people you know, and in addition to your wisdom and your insights. We need to become more involved with Workforce Solutions people, with the one-stops, and with business and industry. To let them know. You heard Judy talk about some agreement in House that her program has made with local businesses of various kinds at the hospital to provide services in exchange for some funding. Workforce Solutions probably has funding to help our programs provide services they need provided, or their clientele needs. So this is exciting that this law is shaking us up.
I'm glad you have a chance to stand on that.
Well, what else will we do? It is exciting though. Now the other major change is we've got these NRS performance measures we have to do. In the past, we had performance measures. Title I people had performance measures. Title III people had now a unified bunch of performance measures. So we're going to be measuring things more in the same way as Workforce Solutions does, or they in the same way that we do. That's a good thing too, because it allows more effective sharing of data for one thing. And we expect that once this is passed, we will get guidance from the Department of Education, like this thing you have in your packet, guidance about how to develop the state plan, how they want us to do it. And we'll follow it. But usually when they give guidance, I have to say it makes sense. If you read this, it looks, all these things they say you should do look like good ideas and not oppressive requirements. I don't know what time it is. I was trying to.
10:50. 10:50.
Oh, excellent. Now, there used to be, in the old Workforce Investment Act, there was a thing called incentive funding that charged for incentives. If adult education in a state met its performance goals, a certain percentage of them, 70 I think it was, it should have gotten incentive funding, but the act was set up so that a state could only get incentive funding if Workforce Solutions also met their goals. Now, there have been a few years when we would have received this incentive funding, but Workforce Solutions would meet their goals. And the funding is not, they don't get it, we get it. We receive it. So they had no motivation. Plus, it comes out of the adult education pot, the incentive funding. They don't, it doesn't cost them, they don't get, you know. Now, a change is that incentive funding is not there anymore. We're not going to mess with it. In your red folder, there's some assorted items. The first one, I think, if it's the same as mine, is Title II of the current WIA. You can see what we're about. And then there is a few pages stapled together that look like this. This is the table of contents for the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act that we hope will pass this summer. Now, I only gave you the table of contents so you could get an idea of what it will look like. It's accessible online, but it's 811 pages, and I didn't figure you wanted all of that. And, pardon, you didn't want it either.
You figured it.
And then there's a brief overview of the Workforce Investment Act, as it is now.
Francis, let me go back to that common incentive money. Are you saying that's gone away?
From the Workforce Investment Act, they no longer have providing incentive to the states for reaching their goals.
But it's not been shifted over to like this organization.
I think that was, my guess is that might have been one of the sacrifices made to, you know, one of the compromises. I don't know that.
Because I know they discussed that with higher ed, doing the same sort of thing. Higher ed is resistant innovation for fear, you know, basically saying, well, how can we do a budget? You're going to get 85% of the budget. And you know, I have 80% of my expenses are personnel expenses. So what happens to those people if I don't meet my goals? Like tell them to go away?
Right. Oh, you mean with the higher ed funding?
Correct.
Yeah, I know that they're still working on that.
Yeah. So that's what I was asking. If you come back to us and see we have the same sort of problems.
I hope.
But on the other hand, if you know, I think you hit the nail on the head. if you're giving more, if you have more money available, and the base budget covers whatever you need to do, and this really is incentive, that's good. That can move you in the right direction.
It could. And when you consider that the goals of performance-based funding are, well, ultimately the goal is to incentivize us to serve our students better. You know, we can't actually even depend on being able to do that when we have to take money away from programs in order to incentivize efforts. It's just, it's counterproductive. And so that's why I think that's what's meant.
It has to be new money.
It has to be new money. And there has to be new money every year. Or there has to be enough new money to set aside some of it, so it never goes into the baseline and always on. You've got to be able to maintain stability better for our programs too. What happens under our current attempt at performance-based funding? What happens is enough people to improve their performance. Someone who's just cruising along, still doing okay, but hasn't moved forward, is going to lose money. And that's just not okay.
That's counter. If you have an area that is in really need of services, and they're the okay group, yeah, that's not fair. That's counterproductive.
So our challenge, and I think we can do it somehow. So we might have to get really creative. We might, for example, they're probably not to do with this House Bill 99 work group, but there could be ways to partner better with industry and have them provide funding for certain aspects. I mean, I don't know. I bet we could get creative and come up with it. And I wanted to say that another thing that we would like in the state office from this council and all of the subcommittees is that they look at other states to see what other states are doing and how successful they are, because there's a lot of variety about how they operate. You know, we get 120% of our funding from the state legislature, 100 and something percent, right? Minnesota gets 1,200% of their federal funding from the legislature. That's their effort. And they get enough that when the sequestration happened, I was at a meeting with the state directors. Minnesota didn't worry. So, and then you have Texas that only does a third. So there are states that are very good at some things and not so good at others, and then some other states are very good at the other things. And from my perspective, even though I have contact with state directors, it's limited because I don't have a lot of contact with them. I don't have a lot of time for that, and I see them once a year, and some of them twice a year, and that's it. And with more people doing research into what's going on in professional development, what's going on with state plans, what's going on with distance ed and everything, and funding, we can probably help ourselves a lot. So on the initial agenda for this meeting, there was going to be quite a significant amount of time set aside to do some business. But we thought that we could make this meeting a lot shorter, and because it's in two groups, yesterday's group and today's group, there's no way you can do things like elect officers should you want to do that. But what I want to point out is that this council can be run the way council members want it to be run. You can choose to have a chairperson, you can choose to have office, you can choose whatever you want. I'd be pleased to just facilitate meetings for you, whatever you choose if you want. And if you wanted to, you could have bylaws. But you can be as informed as you like. But we would like, we just need to make sure that we have a record of the meeting. This is being recorded, by the way, and will be available online, as was yesterday's. So, what we'd like to ask you to do, once this meeting is concluded, is to consider what sorts of things you would like to be involved in that we're trying to do right now. Consider how you and when you would like to meet next. We anticipate that this group might meet quarterly, maybe more often sometimes if it feels the need, or less often sometimes. But quarterly sounded like a good thought initially. We will send out a survey to find out, like, your thoughts about what you would like to work on, what you'd like to focus on. You could focus on all of it if you want. It's all connected. And how you feel about meetings, because the group needs to start. We need to get the two groups. There were about 15 people, like yesterday. Yeah. So you're the little tiny bunch. You got to get in like the way you've done here. So, and I really want to. I want to give you some resources to our website. Look at our website. Look at it kind of closely. There are, for example, available on there are funding formulas. Last year's funding formula that we used, right, is on there. NRS tables, many years, many things available on there.
Ms. Steve, I thought I heard where the AV directors get together. Do they get together? They all get together?
Well, we have conferences, and we have some other meetings. There's a directors council, which is not all the directors, but
many of them.
Yes. Yeah. And then they would disseminate information to them.
Many of these state local program directors will participate in this council. Is that what you're asking? And the ones who don't, I mean, we want everybody to get the benefit of what you do. Right? The people, the local program directors are resources for you, too, a lot. They also give us input through their Directors Council and through the New Mexico Adult Education Association. So this advisory council is the group that is here to use us as a resource to feed us back creative ideas and help us plan, help us keep our act together and head in the right direction.
But the assumption is that we have our act together, you know. But
well, you know, the local programs will benefit a lot from participation.
I think when one listens to where we're at today, yes, coordination is a foremost item on the table, I believe, as far as the council is concerned. Secondly, that there are priorities that we talked about, primarily addressing the state plan, simultaneously considering the federal intent. There are some things that we need to integrate, and all the while having to come up with our own plan. And hopefully in that data collection that we've had all the input. And I think what that leads to is the timetable, which the group, the council, we determined that we need to meet periodically and listen to our priorities, and at the same time, there are some legislative activities at the state level that we need to also coordinate with.
The council could be members of the council, not the council itself. Some members of the council are in an excellent position to be able to support adult education related initiatives in the legislature. Citizens can do that. Things that I can't do. So that's a good thing. And citizens can then learn enough to, the legislature needs to learn about adult education. House Memorial 99 was a major tool for just to educate the legislature. What? They have to read it and think about it. And we had a legislator, Representative Vicmietta, who was a champion of literacy and adult education. And
Now it's your turn.
and now he's retiring, but what he did consistently for the last few years was stick a bill in there to give adult education more money, and what that meant was a lot more money, so everybody go, what? And then there'd be big discussions at the committee meetings, and people would learn about adult education, and when a committee puts adult education on the agenda, then our adult students get to go to the meeting and say, here's what it did for me. And the legislators like to hear from the students. And I was at a meeting, I don't know if you were at this one, Tom. I was at a meeting at which about 3 students took turns saying their thing. And I don't know how many of you have been to one of those hearings, but it's kind of a shallow horseshoe of all of the members of the committee sitting up a little higher and behind this thing, and you're at a blue table. And so these students are sitting with a microphone. I mean, it's not easy for these students, but they did that. And one of the legislators gave a personal story about what adult education had done for his nephew. Saved his life, basically. Kept him out of prison. So then 3 legislators, one at a time, after thinking, you could tell first, one of them said, I dropped out of school and I did adult education, and now I have 2 master's degrees and I'm on the legislature. And then there were 2 more who had similar stories, and they came out, they spoke them. A lot of people at GEDs keep it a secret. And that was so inspiring to those students to see that. So that kind of process is, the legislative process is not entirely about getting money and getting laws passed. It's a lot about educating the legislators for later when they can do that, and getting them to understand and support. And so that's important.
You mentioned an association, so there's an association.
There is.
The Mexico Adult Education Association.
Because they could be a vehicle.
They are.
We do.
The advocacy vehicle.
So
We do.
their advantage, frankly, is that looking at that map, you're everywhere.
Yeah.
So
The only problem is we don't have money to really do the stuff that it's all volunteer on our part, so it's very, very difficult to, in some cases, but we try our best, and we're developing more and more connections.
And they're the people who organize groups of students to come.
yes.
Yeah.
And we have a legislative day every year where we get them up at the roundhouse during their session. And we spend the day up there talking to our legislators and so on and so forth. We try to keep in contact with some of the ones that have been the most supportive. Senator Kernan seems to be a wonderful proponent of adult ed now.
She's from the southeast,
Yes.
and she's a Republican.
Yes.
She didn't know what adult education was 2 years ago, pretty much, until one of her constituents said, we need to get GED out of the law that term, and explained it to her, and she agreed to sponsor the bill. But then in the course of that bill making its way through the process 2 years ago, she really learned about adult education, and she's becoming a champion of it. And in fact, that bill passed unanimously the year before this last year, and it was pocket vetoed by the governor. So they did it again this year. And she, I believe, was the person who ensured that the governor did not pocket veto it.
Where is she from? She's from Roswell. She's Roswell.
Roswell. Jealous.
But again, any community support, we're getting more and more community support from some of the programs in Albuquerque that are coming out, and we're going to make some connections with them, primarily through Gloria and Terry, and the activities that they've been doing in Albuquerque.
Gloria and Terry are directors of two community-based organizations in Albuquerque. So it's a great advantage to us to have programs not only at the colleges, but in the community.
And currently, Gloria is the president of the branch.
So that's the structure is that this division, which the state employees here, are part of the division of New Mexico Higher Education Department. We have oversight of the funding that comes to both the state and federal that comes dedicated to that purpose. And oversight means we ensure compliance and also provide technical assistance. As generally speaking, that's what our authority is. And that would be, for example, we do RFPs and decide who to put funding to, but they're in charge of organizing their own program the way it's best to organize it. We don't tell them who should be in charge of it. We don't tell them who to hire to do what. We, in this state, we have no requirements for teacher certification for adult education. Some states have some requirements, many have none. But our local programs determine what their requirements are. In Albuquerque, they can afford to have more stringent requirements and still get teachers. But if you look at
Grants.
or Terry, or
Yeah, that
we've
problem.
got to provide services there.
I had
So,
2 PhDs working for me.
Well, you're lucky. But I mean,
so what happens
order, but
because of that? Because we cannot afford to require certification for our teachers, because otherwise we couldn't. There would be areas of the state we couldn't provide services, and we can't do that. We have to serve the need. But because of that, our professional development committee has a particularly important job. We have teachers who are passionate, dedicated. Some of them are truly gifted as teachers, but they don't know how to teach. They don't feel secure about it. They don't have the education around it. We need to give people, our teachers, that support. Give them professional development that gives them some vocabulary about educating adults and all that. So it's particularly, professional development is particularly important in states like ours.
and the difficulty also with that, though, is if you do a regional thing like this, we can't afford to send them because we don't have the money. That's one of the difficulties that we have. Is professional development issues.
We're trying to do a lot of it online, but we can't do all of it that way. And we do have, and this council will have access to go to meeting things, so you can organize yourself that way if you wish. We can get them on.
License.
Yeah, we have one.
But it sounds like the memorial gives you an opening.
It does.
It's tremendous. I mean, libraries have used memorials to get,
Right.
you know, back in 2000, 2001.
Right.
It really was an impetus.
That's
Use as a
right.
good- So memorials can be very helpful, where you can put in all the business or training, the certification, or whatever.
Yes, and they educate really.
Yeah.
And I want to say something else about to mention to everyone that you may not know about the Coalition for Literacy. The Coalition for Literacy is closely associated with the state library. We are not doing much with libraries. And we should be. That's a community center. And there was a gentleman at yesterday's meeting who is working with several state agencies and professional groups to develop a broadband system statewide to improve it, and it's closely involving the libraries. So we have an opportunity with this kind of council to start working together on things like that.
But, you know, there's always collaboration, I'm sure, in Silver City, you know, adult literacy groups down at the public library.
In fact, I have a meeting next week with the Literacy Council and the Public Library. We all wrote a joint grant for all three of us and another agency to provide basic computer literacy and at the same time evaluate students' reading literacy. So we're going to try and encourage them to join the appropriate program to get them ready for employment searches.
And I'm sure that you all refer people for tutoring all the time.
But on the other hand, the literacy volunteers in my county shut down 2 years ago.
Well, see, I mean,
So they're
there
not
was
there.
there was a problem too a few years back. A lot of programs do work with the literacy councils, but then there was a question about funding and literacy councils.
Like that,
Unfortunately, we've got a gap.
it should have been resolved 2 years ago. It was resolved,
That was
but the message is not getting out.
that was an asking.
It was, but it's still that little touchy, you know, wait a minute, I'm still a little scary, I'm still a little worried. One of our, like where I'm at, I deal with 4 different councils. It's not one council I work with. Each of my counties, I have 5 different councilors, has their own council. So I got to work with different ones, and one of my main ones, their main leader, their main director, all of a sudden one day said enough and turned around and walked out. And so we're rebuilding that program and our collaboration.
Could I add, are there other questions or input like that too? What I want to do is this meeting, because there are so few of us, has been able to be short, and I'm glad of that. I want to leave room for people to continue talking, but I want to be sure that the questions about this council and contributions about how it might be been addressed.
Just a quick comment and partly question, rhetorical question. On the survey that we talked about earlier, for the group and getting organized and laying out a plan, I'd like to kind of revisit that briefly. But all of these things that we talked about probably come up and be integrated into that.
Into that survey monkey
Laying out a
brain.
plan.
I think if this makes sense to you, are you still there, Judy?
Judy's left.
Okay, if this makes sense to the people here, I would like it to be sort of general about which of the following current areas do you see yourself involved in, and any other areas you think we need to become involved in, because that's what we need too. But the ones we need to do urgently are professional development funding and beginning to think about the new plan. But we are simultaneously in this agency working on distance learning issues and IBEST and how to get sustainable funding for that. For example, the IBEST pilot programs, this agency got a grant from a foundation grant from Jobs for the Future in 2011, something, to develop IBEST pilots. We chose not, that was a planning grant, we chose not to apply for the implementation grant because the guidelines said that we had to have absolute numerical goals. Like under this grant, we would implement the IBEST stuff so that within 2 years, 300,000 of our students would be blah, blah. That would work in Illinois, but it's not going to work in here. You know, we would never have been able to comply with the terms of that grant. And we talked about it with them. But I worked with Santa Fe Community College, who was applying for the TAACCCT grant. And they included IBEST in that, so it got, the pilots got to be funded some more. And now that funding is going away. So we supported them in asking the legislature for IBEST funding last year, and the legislature just had to learn what IBEST was. And so I don't know that they got any funding, but we're progressing. So we have things like that about how to sustain that pilot. We're not in charge of it. And IBEST really isn't even an adult education project. It's a college project. It's colleges and adult education collaborating for the benefit of college students, you know. So, so there are things like that that aren't on our top 3 list right now that are still there and we're still trying to work on. So I would like in that survey to ask what you would like to offer and how you feel about meeting time, frequencies, and places. And then I'll share the results with all of you. Is there a way on SurveyMonkey to let everybody look at the results automatically?
Not that I know of.
I'm the best person to ask.
Okay, well, anyway, I'll be sure
I thought
that
there was a way, and I thought there was a way to encourage, you know, like a.
I'd see.
It depends on which kind of SurveyMonkey
Yeah.
account you have.
I would-
If you're just using the basic
no,
one,
we've got a better one.
okay, yeah, because it depends on which one you're using. Because SurveyMonkey has multi-levels, just like GoToMeeting has a multi-level. Some of them do have where they can share. Just the name when I say that.
So yeah,
Can I ask a question?
yeah, sure.
Isaac, your question about including something on that survey, is there
Yes.
something in a general sense that she has not included that you would like to see?
Thank you.
Not really, because I think that what I'm thinking about is a like a condensed, solid plan with everything that are prioritized, if you will, and that's something that we can do in a condensed, abbreviated timeline. I kind of feel that pressure there, and that's why I was asking. That I think if we could peel away the lower priority items and really concentrate on a compact plan, if you will, then we can make the assignments and you know, of course, that's basically what I was asking.
Well, we can talk about that second now, actually, even though we're only a small part of that group. Like clearly, the timeline is a little weird with the state plan because we don't know quite yet when the legislation is going to pass and how the requirements in the legislation will be translated by Department of Education. We don't know that, and I will be trying to find out a timeline from them
Yes.
if I can,
Yes.
which will depend though on if pass it, that will accelerate our timeline, in my opinion, for doing the state plan.
Okay,
Because we can just do it.
quickly insert that your suggestions of identifying champions or having voluntary champions assignments in the coordination where you would take the lead in facilitating. I think that would also help us to identify champions within the legislation or legislative body here as to who would be best in our corner.
I'm quite pleased to facilitate meetings to the extent that this council thinks it's helpful. And in the way the council thinks it's helpful. I would not like to facilitate in the pure sense of being a non-participant, because you need to know what the state office is after from me, you know. But other than that, I'm fine with that, because it's very clear to me that mostly what I want is to hear from you. I'm here for clarification. So.
Not downplaying any of the group's position and role and responsibility, but I think why I support that is to help us get organized and really get on solid ground.
Yeah, I was, that's where I thought you were going. That's why I asked you that question. If you need something so quickly that it's going to take you time to organize the structure that really will be there more for the long run, is it something that can help you right now? Probably can, and how long would it take you to organize? But I don't know what the urgency is with these plans. And then the other thing I thought of was we have 20 people, so it's not like we can't break out in groups and groups. It depends on who agrees to do certain things. But you know, if there really was something urgent, you might want to even lower down the task. Say there's just one or two. These are going to be the top ones that need to be done in a meeting. But then thinking about the organization, you know, from an advisor perspective, you know, how crucial is that? I think Francis is. I think you did very well today, Francis, in terms of giving us this information, and I feel confident that you can move us in the same direction without having a body. That's my own personal. Having an organized body, at least for me.
So from what you said, the council does not have a role in relationship to the memorial.
Well, you know,
because memorial is the first deadline that it's August and stuff.
It's the quickest deadline, and here's what I don't know. They're just assembling people to be on it, on that working group, and they're supposed to get them from designated places, like the Community College Association, the Independent Community College Association, the LESC, the LSC, the NMHED, the Directors Council, all kinds of places, and I don't even know who's going to lead this group. I've been asked to collect some of those people by the secretary, but I don't know, does he intend to have me do this? Maybe he does, but if he does, I'm like, wow, because we don't have time, you know.
Francis, there was some talk about the possibility of delaying that report.
Well, I think what can happen, I actually asked a staffer and I asked Rick Mia. I asked two people. When it looked to me like they weren't going to do it, I said, "What?" I was somewhere else. They both attended our annual conference, and I said, "Well, what happens if HED ignores that memorial?" And they both said, "Nothing." And so that means what I think happened is the subsequent pressure, because I told you guys that, from them to the legislators who backed the memorial, got back to them, and they decided to do something. That's what I think happened. Because the only thing to make them do it is just political pressure. Nothing happens if it's just a memorial. I think there's a difference if it's a joint memorial or something, and this was just a house memorial. I don't know. But what that leads me to believe, Tom, is that this working group could come up with anything, something that says, here's our plan. This is very important, and we are not able to do it in this timeline. Here's where we're going with it, and get that to the LESC. I would think that would probably work fine.
But I would like to see it, something before the new legislative session.
Yeah, I would like to see, well, something I think should happen August 1st.
Yeah.
Just to have something on the table.
Yeah.
So, otherwise, someone's going to ask you, where's the report?
Yeah, and if they end up asking me, which is maybe going to happen, and I probably won't find out it's going to happen until it was. But I think I'll plan on, in my heart, my head, I'm going to keep it filed in the back of my mind that I may end up having to do that.
Does the report to go to the LESC or the LSC?
Both.
LESC.
I thought it was both.
Oh, I don't remember.
I'd have to go back and look at the memorial.
Well, I thought it was the LESC, but it could be both.
Definitely LESC. I think LSC too.
LESC and LSC were supposed to participate and provide staff.
Okay.
They just found that out too. So.
I think when we see this as a real opportunity to represent the input and the feelings of our constituents at the local level, it's a real opportunity.
Okay, so I think that it's absolutely true that in terms of time pressure, House Memorial 99 is number one. Right? So
Talk to your representatives and senators about that. Take me there on the LESC.
and I'll be talking to all of you about when I have questions. Like, tell me what to say if I have to say it, Because my belief is we need to present something to them on August 1st that expresses intention to continue with this and accomplish it. And maybe even can go so far as to tell the direction it's heading or something. What do you think?
Yeah.
Well, they both meet at different times.
I know.
And to get on their agenda is going to be kind of hard. So you got to get on their agenda first.
Yeah, August.
Well, if worse comes to worse, they do have a community input section at the end.
Yeah.
And if Francis can't go up there, I'm sure somebody from the mayor could get up there and say, hey, we have this house memorial. It's our understanding that the process has begun, but that nothing has really come of it yet, and yet we still want to have a report done and presented to you at a later date. I mean, that's a definite possibility. And by the way, I don't think they meet. I think they meet like August 15th or something like that. So you'd have at least an extra 2 weeks to do something about it for whatever that's worth.
So that's what I'm going to have to be looking at first. But I think for all of us, that's something that's in our heads right now until I can see you run it through. And in terms of the agenda items, in terms of urgency, those 3 tasks. The bottom one, to me, is number 1, professional development. The second one is number 2 to me, in terms of urgency. And the state plan is number 3 to me. Because I think we're a little thwarted right now about even how to go about the state plan.
But they're all connected.
Everything we do is so connected, and in fact, that's so important to remember. It's really hard sometimes to not feel scattered, and the way not to feel scattered, at least my job, is to sit back and have a look again at that it's all one thing and how it's connected. And we can't, and you'll help us not drift off to focus on something to the exclusion or in contradiction of something else that is connected.
Seems like priority number 1 and 2, they pretty much go hand in hand, and that would be something that we should tackle together.
Which, these 1 and 2?
The funding formula and the professional development.
Yeah. Now, we didn't, the professional development group talked a little about what we were doing yesterday, and they weren't able to today, but I believe, and it's so hard for me to know this at this time of year, I believe that they have about $200,000 from us, which is the only place they're going to get money. I mean, $200,000 of a professional development budget for them to consider when they're considering costs of doing various things. And maybe more, but I think it's about $200,000. Oh,
I would just leave it alone. Thank you. Sorry. Sitting on the cricket.
We can facilitate a meeting with the coalition.
Yeah.
It needs to be placed. And I also would advise you to involve the Department of Cultural Affairs.
Yeah.
Because there's some pressure on them to do something.
Should I go through, see, this is what kind of advice I really need. Should I go through the state librarian or not?
One thing that
The state librarian just resigned.
She did?
She did, yeah.
One thing the community groups could do is with the LAFC, and they do have a community input session at the end where you get 2 or 3 minutes to go up and speak. You could go in, even though adult ed is not on the agenda, you could go in there and talk about your concern. And if we get people to go there every session, this next one I think is at the, here in Santa Fe at the Native American School. I think it's the next one.
Santa Fe Indian School?
Santa Fe Indian School, I think next week. And then the next one is, I think, in July is up in Farmington. And so, you know, if you get people on a regular basis going there, that's one of the things that NMHED is going to try to do, is get somebody up there for basically every session and say, hey, you know, what about adult ed? What about the funding? What about these issues? And so on. And just to make them aware that there is a concern.
And I like that people will be going and saying, I'm me, not I'm from the mayor.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's from the
I think I think they're sick of seeing me.
Rick told you that last
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
They love your job.
Then you know you did your job.
Well, they know me by sight now. They say, hi, Tom, how's it going?
So, who at DCA? And in what way? You think I should I try to get them?
I'll talk to you more about it.
Or you talk to them, invite them to be on this council.
Yes.
Yeah. Good, okay. That's perfect. Are you eating cold? Yes. You opened the windows and hoped that it wouldn't get freezing.
It was just real stagnant, just get some circulation going.
Other things,
You want people in the field to speak?
are there still people there?
Yeah. Open it up.
Are they muted?
Yep.
Yes. Can we look if there anything they typed?
Nothing typed. Nathan, do you have any questions? Marisol, do you have any questions? Matthew, do you have any questions or concerns?
No questions.
Do you have any things to add or concerns?
That would be better. Well, what I would like it so that we could like have this open, but instead of screens so both are coming in, we come in the security door or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like you get there, we have our little bar.
Are you talking to us?
Nathan, Marisol, or Matthew, do you guys have any questions or comments at this time?
This is Matthew.
No questions.
Just to get a copy of like the slides that were presented.
Okay, all of you who field, I didn't send the slides because I was afraid of clogging up your email, but if I send them alone, I will do it. I mean, I'll absolutely do it, okay? Did you get the other things? The other handout?
You want to take this little piece too?
No, nothing yet.
Who's that, Matthew?
Yes,
Are you on the list on this committee?
Or Matthew, can you type in your email address for us, please?
Yes, just a second.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. I appreciate you guys. Have a good rest of the weekend.
Operated by the really, very serious concern about.
I mean, you're my guy now.
He's typing it right now.
Just eliminated. Now, they initially talked to us, colleagues, to take over the program. We were more than willing to get there were some issues, tax issues and so on and so forth that haven't been resolved. And we said until that's resolved, we were very, very close until I went in there and I started pulling out some of the files and there was some issues, and that was over a year ago.
I am sort of calling this officially adjourned. We're waiting on email from Matthew, and I'll send people slides. And you can hang around and find and take the rest of it.
So we're concluding practice.
Once you get things from Matthew, we are adjourned.
Okay. Thank you everyone for coming out. We appreciate your time and efforts. This will be recorded and I will place it on the HE website momentarily. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody. Enjoy the weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm a graduate at West. I know it's a 69.
It's okay. We won't hold that again.